Hi, it's Nicole Banks with Nicole's Business Notebook, where we're bringing together my business besties so that we can learn what we're doing, how we're doing it, and how we can be better together. This week, I have Wendy Kleinfeldt on the show. Wendy, thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I loved having these types of conversations with other women entrepreneurs. So thank you for having me.
Of course, excited. All right, so I think the big thing is I did some stalking on social media,
Love it.
so we'll start there.
Sure.
You are preparing for a competition,
Yes.
and I think that obviously business is important and all of that, but that's kind of where your focus is now. So
Sure.
what inspired you to get into the competition world?
Oh my goodness. I feel like this could be like a 10-part podcast series on just this. I'll say this first and foremost before I forget this point is that I've learned so much about leadership and business through fitness. And fitness for me is both a professional focus as well as a personal passion. So personally, I wanted to compete as a way to as a way to celebrate my own personal growth. I grew up with a lot of insecurities. I think with a lot of women in my generation, we grew up with some very toxic body image messages.
Hmm.
And I for lack of better words, was a victim of that too, right?
Yeah.
Or a recipient of those messages. So, long to make a long story short, just had many challenges with body image, confidence. And it wasn't until I finally got serious about fitness that I realized, oh my gosh, there's so much of myself that I have been overlooking or discounting because of the external messages. And fitness helped me to really embrace my own inner power. At the same time, I was working professionally as a coach, as a leadership, specialist, and I realized, oh my gosh, you know what? Fitness really does help peak your performance in ways that we don't give it credit for. Like when I was working in the corporate space, many leaders would want coaching around how can I manage people better? How can I be a better leader? But they never wanted to talk about what they did for themselves. What did you do? Like, what are you reading? What are you consuming? How are you taking care of your mind? How are you taking care of your body? Like, they didn't want to talk about that because it doesn't sound businessy from the outset. But when you dig deep and you look at the science of what fitness actually does for you, uh, it, it is the biggest differentiator in terms of how you perform with your mental acuity and clarity. So, getting into the competition was a little more personal for me, right? There's no professional calling for me to be a professional bodybuilder, but personally, to me, it was just a way to celebrate how far I've gotten. And I'm really happy that I've been able to kind of weave this into my business as well.
I think that's inspiring, from the diet culture of the 90s
Oh,
and,
yeah.
all the things that, we heard as kids and our moms and,
Yeah.
our aunts and that whole bit in that culture, also. And then from there, my dad was adopted by Filipinos. So I think, having the Asian, sort of
Ah,
perspective too, I don't
sure.
look like it, but, is how I was raised. I think that that kind of lines into things too. And, Asians seem to be a bit more, out of pocket when they're like, oh, well, you've gained some weight. They have no issues making those
Yeah.
comments.
Yeah. I totally feel you. I grew up with very traditional Chinese parents and community. Like I didn't grow up in the US. I grew up in Hungary, which is also a very different culture when it
Hmm.
comes to body shaming as well. Not that it doesn't exist there, but again, people just have a very different barrier
Right.
around giving you that kind of feedback, if you will.
Hmm.
And then I've spent some years in Thailand, which, very similar to your experience. I remember some I would say exchange students who are American who went to Thailand, and they had a really hard time dealing with what they felt like was body shaming comments, but they thought it was just, I'm just giving you a comment. Yeah. And so I totally feel you. Like there's that pressure coming from family, coming from the media, society, and just wanting to fit in, right? I think at the end of the day, we're all just trying to fit in. So I think part of that is we're trying to measure to an external benchmark. And
Hmm.
I think that happens in business too, right? Like I see a lot of business owners, a lot of women entrepreneurs who are thinking that they need to make their first million right out the gate. And that is due to a lot of misinformation and bad messaging on social media as well.
Hmm. No, I think that's a great reminder. So let's go back to your journey.
Sure.
Going to from working out and making your fitness a priority to bodybuilding. It seems like a big A to Z.
Yeah.
in a big journey that you've gone through.
Yeah.
So, explain a little bit about that because, I think for women, we don't necessarily go like, oh, I want to be a bodybuilder when I grow up.
Sure.
So tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So, um, I'm thinking because I'm trying to make this coherent and more
Yeah.
seamless to articulate. So I grew up thinking that my body was broken. I grew up thinking that there was something wrong with me, that I was genetically wrong. Now looking back, and I almost want to cry for my younger self because no child should grow up thinking that way.
Yep.
And and then I carry that thought into adulthood and wanting to keep trying to fit in, right? Yo-yo dieting and all that. But at the same time, I always had this urge to want to help people. It's why I became a leadership coach. I was a consultant and coach in the corporate space. And I just had this inkling once I got into fitness. I thought, maybe I want to help people. Maybe I can be a fitness coach. I'm not a pure fitness coach per se, but what I found throughout the journey was that I just loved being able to prove myself wrong through fitness,
Hmm.
like being able to lift something heavy. Wow, I didn't think I could do that.
Wow.
Okay, so what else have you been thinking that you can't do that you can, right? And this applies to a lot more than just fitness.
Hmm.
And that expanded to this thought of what else can I achieve, right? If I am wrong about my body and my capability, what else can I do? What's the next level? And I remember one night I was scrolling through social media, and at the time, this was like the beginning of me just like really, really getting into it. And I was looking at images of these women competitors, and I just thought, wow, that's just the amount of dedication, the discipline, the years of effort. You know that this was not an overnight thing.
Hmm.
And I saw that and I just had so much admiration. And again, I was still holding on to self-limiting beliefs that I could never do that. I could never do that. And and it was actually my husband who was there next to me, and I turned to him and I looked and I showed him these pictures and I just casually said, I I just I don't think I could ever do something like that. Do you think? And his immediate answer was, well, of course. He didn't say it flippantly. It wasn't sarcastic. It was just like something he just naturally knew. He was like, of course you can. And and that made me think, wait, if he believes it, why don't I believe it? Right?
Yep.
Why don't I believe that I can do that? And so that kind of got me thinking. I'm like, if I can do something hard, or if I can do something that other people would say you cannot do it, then that means I'm going to take it on as a challenge. Like I get competitive too. So when I think, oh, you can't do something, I'm like, why not me? Why not? And so I kind of played with that idea. I kept playing with it. I actually got education. I got, a college level education from some very, very big names in the fitness field. Because I wanted to do it right. I wanted to kind of test out the water. So what it was like to be a professional in the fitness space. And the more that I kind of dabbled in the waters, the more I realized, pure fitness coaching is maybe not entirely my thing. I like to incorporate it within business and leadership coaching.
Hmm.
But this whole bodybuilding thing just felt like my Everest. I used to explain to people that some people are athletes and they want to do Tour de France, just cycle their asses off.
Hmm.
Or some people want to climb a literal Mount Everest. And you ask, like, well, why? What's the point of doing that? Why not? To test your human potential, to reach that peak performance in a very visceral bodily way. And to me, I was like, I'm going to do this. This is going to be hard, but I find such thrill in it. And so, if other women are thinking, oh, should I get into bodybuilding just because it's hard? It's like, no, don't do it just because you want to, just because you can.
Right.
Do it because there's a purpose for you. There's a passion. And to me, I connected my personal passion, my own personal journey. So as I've been walking this in the last few months, and I'm about 2 weeks out from stage at this point, I'm doing this and I visualize, acknowledge that when I step on stage, it's an act of rebellion against the messages we receive from society about what we can and can't do as women, about what we should look like, about our capabilities. And also, it's my way of healing my own, inner child.
I love that. I think, the why not me is really powerful and something that I think women, especially, aren't given that ability or, that, understanding that we can do whatever the heck we want.
Yeah.
And, how, whatever it's going to take to get there, we have all the tools so
Hmm.
long as we make those opportunities for ourselves. So I think that that's a great reminder.
Mm.
So, we've been we talking about the fitness, and obviously something you're very passionate about. But let's kind of go back. So you were corporate.
Yes.
Now you have moved to Purple Tiger Fitness, and we'll talk about that a little.
Sure.
But that transition from corporate to entrepreneurship is a bear.
Yeah,
So can
it
you
is.
talk about kind of your journey, what you learned along the way?
Sure. So I think the journey, um, I would say for anyone who's in corporate right now and wanted to transition, I would say just give yourself time to not just learn how to be an entrepreneur, but to unlearn the corporate ways, because
Yes.
those two are not the same thing.
Yep.
And I remember the very first pitch I gave straight out of corporate, I did it exactly how I would pitch to a senior leader within corporate. And I looking back, I'm like, that's why I didn't get a call back. That's why I just got a very polite thank you at the end, because I wasn't pitching, I was asking for permission. And that's what you do in the corporate space. You're not really supposed to stick out very much. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you should, but you shouldn't, right?
Right.
Um, and you have to ask for a lot of permission. In the entrepreneur space, you have to almost forget the lessons you've learned in corporate about, I mean, not everything, right? There's some things, there's some levels of professionalism that you pick up that I think is very useful, but there's certain mindset. The mindset is the biggest thing about how you look at how you show up, how you should take leadership of your expertise, how you want to show up in front of other people. I mean, there's so many things that I think there is a learning curve, and don't expect that learning curve to be 30 days. It could be like 2 years. I'm two and a
Mm-hmm.
half years in, and I feel like I've just broken through, that differentiation between corporate and entrepreneurship. And it's been, slowly along the way. And, luckily for me, I don't know how it all happened. Maybe it's just because I did a good job back in corporate building relationships, but straight out into entrepreneurship, I was, very profitable the first year. And I credit that to, again, the relationships I had built, the reputation I built for myself, and also because of the services I was providing. I was providing corporate consulting services, which is still very corporate adjacent.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, corporate contracts come with really big tickets.
Right.
And and then I've slowly also started to move away from that because I felt like that was still too corporate adjacent. And my focus right now is on women entrepreneurs. Very different audience, very
Mm-hmm.
different kind of market. You have to operate very differently, which feels like I did another pivot, which almost feels like I restarted new again. And that journey, is on its own a learning curve,
Right.
because the way you present yourself to a corporate client is so different to how you build relationships one-on-one with women entrepreneurs. And I would say, allow yourself the grace to be new at something. I think a lot of us are afraid to be embarrassed, are afraid to show up as a newbie. But the thing is, and again, this is a lesson I learned from fitness. If you don't allow yourself to be a newbie, then you're never going to allow yourself to learn, because
Mm-hmm.
you're always going to be beating yourself up over mistakes or things that you feel like you should have done. But if you keep holding on to that, you're never going to be in a space of learning. You're going to be in a space of lack. And that's the thing that I would want to share with other folks who are trying to make that leap is you have to allow yourself to be a newbie. It's very humbling, but you have to allow yourself to be in that space.
I think that's a great point. Being new at something is incredibly awkward and
Yeah,
it can
it
be
is.
embarrassing. And, I mean, just in my own fitness journey, learning how to use the machines and the different things,
Yeah,
you got the gym bros and the meatheads, and then,
absolutely. Yeah,
trying to go in and learn those things. So, I mean, obviously that's fitness, related, but that's, the same sort of process when it comes to learning anything. So
sure.
I think that's great to,
Yeah,
as a reminder. So, leadership has been something that you've been passionate about both in your corporate career and now working with
absolutely.
entrepreneurs. So, let's talk about leadership. What makes a good leader to you?
Oh my gosh. You're asking the billion-dollar question. You truly are, because if you look at all the journals and papers and books that are written over and over again, I mean, they're circulating around the same thing over and over again. I would say this, okay, and it may seem like a contradiction. On one hand, I think being a good leader means you know how to not just articulate a message so clearly to people that it motivates them, but it makes them want to follow you, and that you know how to bring them along with you, not through authoritarianism or through that approach, but through approach of like, come with me because my message inspires you. A really good leader will know how to do that. And it's not a skill set that everyone can build. You can learn it, but some people may naturally be a better leader than others. On the other hand, I would say if you are a good leader of messaging, of leading a strategy, but you don't know how to have humanity, you're not a good leader. So those two can come at odds sometimes because people think of business leaders as, can you drive profit? How's the bottom line doing? Are your stakeholders, your shareholders, are they happy? And if they are happy, then you're a good leader. And in some ways, yeah, that could be true. Knowing how to lead from strategy to execution to profit takes a lot of leadership. And can you be a leader that people will want to follow? And that's the other side, because sometimes those two are not necessarily the same thing. They're almost independent. And I think if you want to know how to be a good people leader, the very first thing is you have to know how to lead yourself. You have to have humanity, meaning you cannot look at the person in front of you or the person below you, depending on how big your organization is. You cannot look at them as just a resource. On paper, yes, they're an asset. However, they're human beings. They have families, they have dreams, they have their own lives. So if you cannot have humanity, then that means you cannot respect them. If you cannot respect them, you're not a good leader. And the prerequisite to that is you got to know how to lead yourself. Like, you have to know and be self-aware of what you're about, what's motivating you, what are your drivers, right? What is pushing you to want to lead? And if you are not clear and honest with yourself, and there's isn't really a right or wrong answer per se, but you have to be honest with yourself, because if you're in it to make money but you're lying to yourself and thinking, oh, I just want to make the world a better place, that kind of disconnect is going to show up. So if you're in it to drive profit, to generate as much revenue as possible, that's not necessarily a bad reason, but you have to be honest with yourself. And then you have to say, okay, what kind of leadership style, what kind of methods of leading people will align to that outcome while also honoring the human, in the person in front of me. So you have to start with you. Can you lead yourself? Do you have self accountability? Can you not be self aware and self reflect and hold yourself accountable? So, and you have to be humble too. So I know sounds like a lot, but you asked $1 billion question, and there's not going to be a simple answer. But if I had to distill it, I would say, yeah, know yourself, like really know yourself, acknowledge the humanity in others, and you have to know how to drive outcomes. Like, if you're just really good with people but you don't know how to drive outcomes, then you're just a really good people person, not a
Right.
leader.
Yeah, I think, focusing on yourself and what you're able to do in your own circle, in your own family, in your own self is a reminder that, not, I don't think is very clear when we're, talking about
Yeah.
leadership and that, evolution, going from middle management to leadership. And,
Yeah.
it's definitely, a $1 billion question, like you said. But I love your answer there. I think that's great. So we've kind of been tiptoeing around, talking about entrepreneurship, talking about fitness. You've obviously kind of melded them together.
Mhm.
So tell me about Purple Tiger Fitness, what you're
Yeah.
doing. I know you mentioned women, so can you
Yeah.
expand on that a little further?
Sure. My passion has always been rooted in elevating the power of women. It just took me a number of years to figure out how I want to go about it, right? Because there's so many different ways that you can achieve a goal. And right now in this season of my life, I'm very focused on women entrepreneurs, women business owners, and wanting to elevate their power and their voice. And I do that at the intersection of leadership, performance mindset, and fitness, meaning if we're going to work together, or whatever content I put out there and you consume and you get my coaching, whether one-on-one or through a course or program, it's always going to be in around the perspective of not just how do you lead others, but how do you keep yourself accountable? How do you make sure that you're fueling yourself through taking care of your body, taking care of your mind? And what are some of the key tweaks that you need to make? Some quick things you can do to keep yourself accountable to your performance, again, through taking care of yourself. And then very tactically, how do you actually lead? How do you actually create a team that will help you scale the business to where to excellence, as I would say. So in short, so in a nutshell, that's my focus right now is how is real. I want women business owners to be, the biggest group of revenue generating groups in the future.
I love that. I mean, we're now more than 50%, so we're
Yes,
trending that way anyway. So
it's
we
awesome.
might as well figure out how to make more money too.
Exactly. Yes, yes.
I think that's great. So, when it comes to women entrepreneurs,
Yeah.
if you could, have one nugget that you would love to share with them so that they could make that next step forward faster, better, longer,
Yeah.
what would you share?
I would say it's a two-parter. I hope that's okay.
No, yeah, come at me.
So, and then, so at the core of it is the message that you know more than you think you do. And the reasoning behind that is I think women tend to be very humble. We tend to self-abase into thinking that we don't know enough and that um, we're not as good, or we were constantly trying to be good enough. And oftentimes we actually know more than we give ourselves credit for. And on the flip side of that, I would say try your best, and this has to be continuous, you can't just do it one time, is to take an inventory or audit where your strengths are and where you need help. And that is super important once you jump into entrepreneurship because, as I've personally found, there's a lot of vultures and sharks in the water.
Yep.
And there's a lot of folks without integrity who will see that you're new and then will come into your circle and convince you that they're the answer to your success, or to they're the answer to filling your gap between now and the future success you want. And oftentimes, it's not necessary. So you have to be clear about what you know and you don't know so that you can make better judgment and better discernment when it comes to doing business with other people. And that way you can have a better sense of, okay, if I know my craft, then what are the skills that I'm missing? Is it marketing? Is it sales? Get very clear on that, and also get clear on exactly what you need help with. And just know that there's not one thing that anyone can do for you that will make or break your business overnight.
Mm.
So I want you to hear that again. There's not anything that someone can offer you that will make or break your business overnight. So, like I said, a lot of vultures and sharks out there that will try to take advantage of you being new, but just hold on to your confidence, hold on to your self-worth. You know more than you do, and just consistently self-reflect on where you need help and get that help accordingly that aligns with you.
Yeah, I think timeline is something that, we obviously all wish it could happen, immediately and, those whole
Sure.
things, but it does take time. And I think that
Yeah.
that's a great reminder. So, obviously you are passionate, you have this competition coming up,
Yeah.
a lot of things going. For those that want to follow your journey, to connect with you, to work with you, how do they contact you?
Yeah, so I always say wherever there's a DM button, you can find me. So uh, I'm very present on social media, on Instagram. So Purple Tiger Fitness. You can find me on LinkedIn as well. You can also find me on Facebook. My website, purpletigerfitness.com. If you reach out to me via Instagram, that's really fast. But really, like I said, anywhere there's a DM button that I have a presence on, you could reach out to me.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So, obviously competition coming up. We want the manifestations and, all of that to get there. So, tell us where we can follow this competition and root you
Yeah.
on.
So, not to make things confusing, but I do have a separate Instagram account that documents my fitness journey. It's a lot more fitness oriented than just strictly business. That it's called Asian Mom Fitness, and I thought it'd be kind of tongue in cheek because I don't
Hmm.
see a lot of Asian women in the field, in the
Yeah.
fitness field. So you can follow my journey there, and the federation that I'll be competing with, they also do Instagram Live,
Oh,
but I'll post that. So if you're on my Purple Tiger Fitness Instagram, I'll release all that so that you know what to look out for.
amazing. We are all rooting for you. The inspiration that you have about, putting fitness and entrepreneurship together is great. Your leadership billion-dollar, tidbits were wonderful. So Wendy, thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah,
This is fun.
100%.
Yeah.
Great. All right. So again, this is another episode of Nicole's Business Notebook, where we are bringing together my business besties so that we can all do better business together. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next week.